Okay, hey guys. So today I want to take a quick look at a game that I played against Fairy-Stockfish 14. I had the white pieces. I was not using any kind of neural net um, I- with in order to improve Fairy-Stockfish's evaluations. I did get the neural net from Fabian Fischer. I actually had requested that he build one. Um, and I am one of his supporters on Patreon. So a little bit ago, maybe about a month ago, he obliged me on that. If you want to get a copy of the neural net to improve Fairy-Stockfish's evaluations, become a supporter of Fabian Fischer on Patreon. I will post a link below if you want to do that. So I have the white pieces, Fairy-Stockfish. It plays this kind of a setup sometimes. It likes to have a little bit of piece development, I think, but it kind of realizes that in Shatranj, usually the knights, at least this knight belongs on d7. This knight on g8, sometimes it develops out to h6. And then sometimes it develops to f6 occasionally, but usually it's either e7 or h6. So my anti-computer strategy, as we saw in the last game I posted against Fairy Max, is that I play a kind of Saif system. I'm trying to get control over the e5 square. uh, okay, so Fairy-Stockfish develops its king a little early. I think actually with a neural net, most of this kind of stuff is fixed. Like it's probably not best for Black to commit his king so early. I have found with a neural net, though, that a lot of the problems that I was having with Fairy-Stockfish were fixed. So one big problem with Fairy-Stockfish is that it always thinks that one opening position that could be like really standard theory is way better for white. It'll give like +1 or +1.5, and you take a look at the position and you just play on a few moves, and pretty soon it brings the evaluation all the way back down to being equal. So the neural net has with the neural net, I don't have nearly so many of those problems. Okay, so e6, pretty typical. Knight f3, f6. I'm just playing for my Saif system. Knight bd2 stays pretty flexible. Bishop d6, g3, and I've left the evaluation open on the side. So for instance here, Fairy-Stockfish without a neural net thinks that this is like plus equals. So when it whichever side is to move. So for instance, since it's my move here, since I'm white, when it says plus, that means that it thinks that I am better. So e5, fe3, and then knight h6. So sometimes Fairy-Stockfish will develop its knight out to h6. Um, putting the knight on e7 looks a little bit more typical, but I think knight h6 is actually a really good move here, and I give it a lot of credit. I think the idea with knight to h6 is just that black stays very flexible, and the knight actually ends up doing a really good job on h6, controlling interesting squares like g4 and f5. c3, pretty normal. ff7, king c2, bishop a6, and then bishop a3. So I think bishop a3 this might be where I start to go wrong a little bit. One big problem for white in the Saif is figuring out where to develop this bishop or if to develop it. Um, it's possible that I should just continue to push a little bit on the Shah side, b3, a3, b4, something like that. Or actually, pawn to b3 followed by pawn to c4. So I could play b3 here, followed by c4. And maybe that's the right idea. But okay, yeah, Fairy-Stockfish has thought about it for a while, and it seems to like my move, bishop a3. So it can't be that bad. Um, rook a8, rook a1. This all seems pretty normal. b6. But you see, one advantage of the knight being on h6 rather than e7 is that black has pretty good pressure down the e file. h3, not so sure. Maybe okay. So Fairy-Stockfish is suggesting, I just play like b3, bishop c1, pawn to a3, and just slowly start to work pawns up on the Shah side, and that seems to make a certain amount of sense. What happened in the game for me wasn't great. h3, my idea was to play a rook left, I think, but it leaves this elephant on f1 without any squares to develop to, and that ends up being a big problem for me when this f file opens up. So fe6, rook h2, so I'm continuing with my plan of just doubling on the e file. Looks a little artificial. Rook f8, rook e2, bishop c8. So Fairy-Stockfish playing just a very nice positional game. Okay, yeah, f takes e5. So here I release attention in the position, which I shouldn't do. Okay, so Fairy-Stockfish suggests c4. I kind of like that move. Bishop c1 also looks like a good move. The problem for me is that when I open this f file, that's not really what I want to do, because this bishop on f1 is stuck and black is going to double along the f file and put really bad pressure on it. So yeah, knight g5. This is what I was going for, is that I wanted to use this thematic idea to tickle the pawn on h7. And here, this move, knight to h6, allows black to play a really surprising resource, just knight to f7. And the problem for me is that if I take on h7, then black's going to have a rook coming to h8, and this knight's going to be trapped. So I end up having to take and make this exchange, but now black will double along the f file, and my bishop on f1 is going to be in really bad straits. So yeah, oversight by me after bishop c8. I thought this plan worked to put good pressure on h7, but it does not, due to this very good move by the computer. So after takes and takes, okay, yeah, I agree with what Fairy-Stockfish says. I've got to play something like h4 and try to develop out this elephant. But okay, instead I just make my problems a lot worse. Takes, d4, and now black just pushes past with e4. And my firzan here is really bad. It can't come up to f4 because the bishop, because the bishop controls that square. So so that's one problem with Fairy-Stockfish in WinBoard. So one problem with WinBoard is I've actually got to reload the game now. Let's see. So I have some games here. This was not the Shaw Max draw. Let's see. Fairy Max. All right, Stockfish draw. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately it doesn't support variations, so we'll go through that again. But okay, so you see opening phase, I'm doing okay, but then this play by me was a little artificial, and this doesn't work. So I play takes, and then takes here. And because I can't bring my firzan out, my position's pretty bad here. So I had to think about, okay, how am I going to try to salvage this? Well, in order to salvage this, I'm going to try to play for an opposite colored firzan draw. And that just means I need to exchange off the rooks. So I play b3, black doubles. And here I just go ahead and play c4. This is, objectively it seems like a horrible move because black just plays bishop here. I have to move the knight away, but okay, I'm just going to give this I'm just giving up this elephant. I don't care. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to try to put some pressure on the center. And my goal is to play rook f2 at some point and hopefully exchange another pair of rooks and cross my fingers and hope to make a draw. So king c6 was what the computer played. But after c takes, f takes, and then just king b2, I'm just going to activate this rook. My idea is to play rook c2 with check, and then if the king comes to d6, then I'm going to play knight to b5. So black started retreating, and I pursued the king. Black came up with a knight, and now I'm able to at least take a pawn with check, so I'm going to get at least, I get a pawn for my elephant. And I just go ahead and I start. I'm taking off the major pieces with rook f2. And here I'm going to just really hope to make a draw. Okay, so we get to this position. Material-wise, I have one pawn for the elephant, but black has all the winning chances because there's a really good firzan on d5. So how does this play out? Well, all right, I centralize my king. All right, bishop c1. I'm going to just try to set up a defensive fortress. Okay, yeah, so after h5, I play h4, so I'm locking the position as much as I can. I want to try to hold the firzan side with a pawn, pawn, and king. I want to try to hold this side of the board with pawn, pawn, and the elephant, the firzan. So bishop b6. I start coming up. I'm going to hold the b4 square. Black advances pawns. I'm just tempoing around here. Of course, I don't want to take this elephant because that's going to start weakening this side of the board a lot. So I'm just going to hold my fortress. First hand to c3, bishop back. So I'm just fortressing here. We see a lot of elephant moves as the computer struggles a bit for a plan. King went back. Okay, I'm just continuing to hold, and then, okay, a4. So black's trying to weaken the c4 square, which makes sense. Takes, fc3. I'm just trying to, so, you know, I have to think about this. King is going to probably come into b3, so I want to try to position my king a little bit more defensively. I'm holding this d4 pawn for now. So his king comes in. My elephant comes up. I'm hoping to get this elephant to c5 to guard the a3 pawn. A little less dangerous than having it on c1, because at least then the pawn is guarding the elephant's guarding the pawn. And that's kind of how you want to play for these opposite colored firzan draws. f4, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Black's probably in as good a position to play it now as he ever will be. And then these came off. King c2. I'm just holding. I want to keep that b3 square under control. Firzan up, king over. Bishop b6. I mean, maybe it makes more sense for black to try to start running the king over. But basically, my fortress here does crack. I am going to have to give up the fortress at some point because black's king now can come around and capture on h4. But my goal is that when black captures on h4, I'm going to have enough counterplay taking the a pawn or running the d pawn up to hold this. And so as a matter of fact here I do. I managed to come up, and now I'm going to win the b4 pawn. I guess black could play the firzan down to hold it, but at that point I'm able to start running with a d pawn. So So we see king up, I grab a pawn. Black is going to win this elephant now, but I don't really care. Don't care about the elephant because, I mean, it's trapped. So he's, black has poached it. Black has poached the elephant, but I managed now to have set up a pretty good fortress position. So the important point here is that when black promotes this h-pawn to a firzan, then it's going to be a light squared firzan. So there's really nothing that black can do now to break this fortress. So okay, he gave up an elephant for the pawn, but these pawns are going to hold. The pawn and the firzan are going to hold forever. So I'm able to just tempo. And black, of course, continues to try to play this on for some time, but there's not really any hope here at this point. Black has a little bit of superior material, but this is just a very classic opposite colored firzan draw. And so this just went on for, so it's move 130 now. All right, so this just went on until the 50 move draw limit was reached. Okay, so what did we learn from that game? Well, just kind of thinking about it. I seem to get a pretty decent opening position against Fairy-Stockfish using my Saif. Knight to h6 was an interesting move. I think there was a really clever idea. I played with h3, rook h2, and rook e2 was way too artificial. Needed to leave h3 open for this elephant. Probably like b3, c4, bishop c1. Those would have all been just more logical ideas. And then f takes, knight g5 was just a big oversight by me. But even though we got to a position that was really, really bad for me, in this position I was able to just say, you know what, I don't want to get completely ground out and just slowly lose. I want to try to reach that opposite colored firzan draw by getting a little bit of activity. And then I managed to get one pawn, and then when I took the rooks off the board, yeah, this is a very uncomfortable endgame for white to hold, but with enough time, probably you should be able to draw it. And then last thing here, I should look to see for my games against Stockfish. I want to just look and see if it says in here what the time control was. Let's see, 600 plus 10. So it's 600 seconds plus 10. So that's like, yeah, so this was a 10 plus 10 game. Okay. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching. And I will try to post a link to that Fabian Fitcher site if you want to become a Patreon sponsor for him and get access to the neural net. I'm happy to, do a video at some point on how to set up a neural net in WinBoard if that's something people care about. Thank you.